I'd been married to Melissa for just over 5 years. I'm 33, she's 31, and we have a 3-year-old son named Evan. Life in Seattle had been good to me. I'm a software developer at a tech firm, and with my salary and a sizable inheritance from my father, I've been more than financially comfortable. My dad wasn't Bill Gates, but when he passed suddenly at 58, his life insurance payout left my mom and me well set up. My Korean roots came with their share of values: family, hard work, and maybe a little paranoia about people's intentions. But hey, I thought Melissa was different. Melissa, who has a degree in music education, grew up in a more modest household. Her parents ran a small diner in Spokane, and she worked there through high school to help make ends meet. We met during a college event, bonding over a shared love for classical music. I play violin, she's a cellist. She had dreams of making it big as a professional musician, though those dreams never really materialized. When we first started dating, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. She was beautiful, talented, and shared my interests. But things changed after we got married. Melissa's enthusiasm for her career fizzled out. She stopped practicing as much and spent her days running errands or hanging out with friends. When Evan was born, I assumed she'd channel her focus into being a mom, but that didn't happen either. Most days, Evan ended up with my mom, who lives close by. Melissa? She was always busy. That's where Jay entered the picture. Jay's one of those slick-talking, smooth-dressing types who scream wannabe entrepreneur. He claims to be some kind of big-shot importer from Korea, complete with fake designer suits and flashy business cards. The guy practically drips scam artist. Melissa met him through some mutual friends, and suddenly, she was swooning like a teenager at a boy band concert. I told her the guy was a fraud, but she wouldn't listen. To make matters worse, she started coming home late, or not at all. Her excuses? Laughably bad. Oh, Jay needed help with a translation for his big deal, or I got caught up in a networking event. Right. Networking. Things hit the boiling point when Melissa announced she wanted a divorce. She didn't want to hold me back from happiness, she claimed, as if it wasn't her who had already checked out of our marriage. She didn't even fight me for custody. You're the better parent, and I don't want to disrupt Evan's life, she said. Sure, Melissa. Real Mother of the Year material. I could tell she was planning to jet off with Jay to Korea, where she'd be dependent on him since she barely speaks Korean. That should end well. But the final insult? The divorce settlement. She demanded half of everything, our savings, my income, and even part of the house equity. She had no legal claim to my inheritance, thank God, but still. Half of my hard-earned money was going to the woman who abandoned her own kid for a scammer with shiny shoes. I decided right then and there, if she wanted to play dirty, I'd beat her at her own game. Melissa wasn't exactly subtle, and her laziness was my biggest asset. She barely understood how banking worked here, let alone the digital paper trails she was leaving behind. When she told me she wanted a divorce, I decided to play dumb. Sure, Melissa, whatever makes you happy. All the while, I started preparing for what I knew was coming, the attempted cash grab. First, I reviewed every shared account we had. Thankfully, I had always been the primary account holder for our savings and credit cards, but I'd been stupid enough to give her full access when we got married. Back then, I thought love was about trust. Rookie mistake. At least I still had access to her personal checking account, the one I'd set up for her years ago. I made sure to review the fine print, and yep, I was still listed as a co-owner. She'd never bothered to change that detail, probably didn't even know she could. Next, I started pulling copies of our recent transactions. It didn't take long to find the red flags. She was funneling money out of our savings into her checking account in small amounts, likely hoping I wouldn't notice. She was also maxing out our shared credit cards on purchases that didn't benefit anyone but her. Designer bags, jewelry, high-end dining, you know, the essentials for a soon-to-be divorcee running off with a conman. But that wasn't the kicker. The real goldmine came from her laptop. Melissa's grasp of technology was laughable. She used the same password for everything, Evan 2019. A nice nod to our son, who she was ditching. Once I logged in, I found her email inbox cluttered with messages from Jay. He wasn't even trying to hide his intentions. One email stood out. Subject: Trip details. Hey babe. Can't wait for you to be here with me. Make sure to get everything transferred before we leave. Once we're in Korea, it'll be too hard to sort out your accounts. Let me know if you need help. Love you. J. Translation. Make sure you rob your husband blind before we run off. I didn't stop there. Using her laptop, I logged into her social media. She'd been DMing her friends about how she and Jay were going to live a dream life in Seoul, complete with luxury apartments, designer wardrobes, and endless parties. The funniest part? Jay's business empire turned out to be a rental storefront he used to fake legitimacy. A quick Google search revealed he'd filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago. What a catch. By this point, I had everything I needed to build my case. I saved copies of her emails, transaction logs, and social media messages on an encrypted drive. Not because I was planning to take her to court. Divorce law in our state is no fault, which means the judge doesn't care if she's a cheating gold digger. No, this evidence wasn't for the legal system. It was for me. And for her eventual humiliation. I didn't confront Melissa right away. That would have been sloppy. Instead, I played along, letting her think I was the clueless husband she was about to outmaneuver. Over the next few weeks, I laid the groundwork for what I like to call my scorched earth exit plan. Step 1. I made some quiet financial adjustments. I opened new bank accounts under my name only, transferring my paychecks and inheritance into them. Then, I set up a trust for Evan, making sure he'd be taken care of no matter what happened. Melissa wouldn't see a dime of it. Step 2. I pulled the rug out from under her spending. She'd been racking up charges on our shared credit cards, assuming I'd just pay them off. Nope. I removed her as an authorized user and reported the cards as compromised. The bank issued me new ones, and her old ones stopped working immediately. That designer handbag she had her eye on? Declined. Step 3. I called up our lawyer. Since she'd already signed off on the divorce terms, including the split of our savings, she couldn't legally take more than her share. But I knew Melissa wasn't going to play by the rules, and I wanted to be ready when she didn't. Finally, the moment I'd been waiting for arrived. Melissa announced that she and Jay were flying to Korea in 2 days. She was practically giddy as she told me how she wanted to wrap things up quickly so we could move on. She even had the nerve to ask if I could drop her off at the airport. Sure, I said with a straight face. Anything for you. That night, as she was packing her bags, I got a notification on my phone. A series of large transfers had just been made from our joint savings account to her personal checking account. Melissa, ever the amateur, was clearly trying to empty our shared funds before skipping town. She probably thought I wouldn't notice until she was safely out of the country. What she didn't realize was that her personal checking account wasn't as personal as she thought. The moment the transfers cleared, I drove to the bank where her account was held. With my ID and co-owner status, I requested a cashier's check for the full amount. The teller didn't even blink. By the time Melissa and Jay boarded their flight, I had drained every penny she thought she'd stolen from me. I walked out of the bank with a grin that could have cracked granite. Melissa and Jay were likely somewhere over the Pacific, sipping overpriced champagne and dreaming of the luxurious life awaiting them in Seoul. Meanwhile, I was busy putting the final nail in the coffin of their little fairy tale. After draining Melissa's personal account, I crossed the street to my own bank and opened a brand new account in my name only. The cashier's check, representing what she'd stolen from our joint savings, went straight into it. I also closed out our shared accounts, cutting her off from any residual funds she might have tried to access. As for the inheritance, it had long been safeguarded in a high-yield account Melissa never knew existed. With my finances locked down, I turned my attention to their trip. Thanks to her emails, I knew their exact flight and even the hotel where they planned to stay. I emailed the hotel, pretending to be Melissa, and canceled their reservation. Simple, quick, and devastatingly effective. I even made sure to do it late enough that finding a replacement room upon arrival would be nearly impossible. Let's see how Jay's millions handle that one. But I wasn't done yet. Melissa had been bragging on social media about their plans, including photos of their fake business deals and some not-so-legal purchases they'd been making. Nothing too flashy, but enough to raise an eyebrow with the right people. A quick anonymous tip to the South Korean customs office, complete with screenshots of their escapades, was all it took. I made sure to phrase it just vaguely enough to arouse suspicion. I think these individuals may be attempting to bring undeclared assets into the country. It didn't matter if they had anything illegal on them. A customs flag meant one thing: delays, questioning, and humiliation. The next morning, I woke up to the kind of chaos I'd been hoping for. My phone lit up with a barrage of texts and voicemails from Melissa. The messages were a mix of anger, desperation, and hilariously transparent attempts to guilt me into helping her. "David, what did you do? I can't access my account. They're holding us at customs. Help. I made a mistake. Please just let me explain." I didn't respond. I didn't even block her number. Reading her frantic attempts to reach me was too satisfying. By the end of the day, the voicemails took on a different tone. The bravado was gone, replaced by the raw panic of someone who realized they'd played themselves. Apparently, Jay wasn't too thrilled about the financial situation they'd landed in. Melissa's savior had expected her to bring a hefty cash infusion to their new life. Instead, she showed up broke and dependent. I could only imagine the scene: Jay realizing he'd hitched his wagon to someone who couldn't deliver, Melissa scrambling to explain why her bank accounts were empty, and both of them stuck in a foreign country with no safety net. That evening, I took Evan to the park with my mom. As he played on the swings, I treated myself to a coffee and smiled. Revenge wasn't just a dish best served cold, it was a goddamn 5-course meal. The fallout from my little masterpiece unfolded exactly as I'd hoped. Over the next few weeks, I heard through mutual acquaintances, and hilariously, from Melissa's own desperate attempts to contact me, that her life had spiraled into chaos. Turns out, Jay wasn't quite the millionaire importer he claimed to be. Shocking, I know. He'd been living paycheck to paycheck, spinning elaborate lies to impress people like Melissa. Without the fun she promised, their dream life in Seoul quickly turned into a nightmare. I heard they managed to scrape together enough for a dingy apartment, but that didn't last long. Jay, ever the con artist, bailed on Melissa once he realized she had nothing to offer him. Last I heard, she was stuck teaching beginner cello lessons to pay rent, a far cry from the glamorous life she'd envisioned. Poetic, isn't it? Meanwhile, my life couldn't have been better. The divorce was finalized with a clean split, on paper at least. The reality was far more lopsided in my favor, thanks to Melissa's incompetence. Evan and I settled into a comfortable routine. My mom, always the rock of our family, stepped in to help whenever I needed support. The trust fund I'd set up for Evan ensured his future was secure, and with my finances untangled from Melissa's, I had more flexibility to enjoy life. I started taking weekends off to spend quality time with Evan, trips to the zoo, beach days, and lazy afternoons building Lego cities in the living room. At work, things were thriving too. With no emotional baggage dragging me down, I threw myself into a new project that earned me a promotion. Funny how quickly life improves when you cut the dead weight. One day, as I was enjoying a rare quiet evening at home, my phone buzzed. A new email. From Melissa. Against my better judgment, I opened it. "David, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I just want to say I'm sorry. For everything. Life hasn't been easy for me lately, and I realize now how much I took for granted. If you ever want to talk or anything, I'm here. Melissa." I stared at the screen for a moment, then closed the email. No response. No acknowledgement. She wasn't worth a single second more of my time. Instead, I poured myself a glass of whiskey, raised it in a quiet toast, and smiled. Life has a funny way of balancing the scales, especially when you give it a little push.